Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I remember the exact second it all collapsed. I asked a question so simple it should have been harmless. I looked at my wife across the table and said, "Honey, what's your biggest wish today?" She didn't hesitate. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't even blink. She looked me straight in the eyes and said her biggest wish was never to touch me again. There was no tremor in her voice. No hint of regret. Just ice. Those words landed harder than any slap could. I sat there for a second, still, like my body hadn't caught up to the impact. The kind of silence where the air feels thick, where even the hum of the fridge becomes deafening. That was the moment I realized something had shifted forever. Most men would have argued, demanded an explanation, maybe begged. I didn't do any of that. I just stood up, walked to the window, and let the weight of her sentence settle in. I wasn't shocked at what she said. Deep down, I already knew. She had been withdrawing for months, turning her back in bed, rolling her eyes when I tried to talk, giving one-word answers that cut deeper than shouting ever could. That moment wasn't new. It was confirmation. She thought I'd fight. She thought I'd break down. Instead, I felt something colder take over. A clarity sharper than anger. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to leave. But not like a fool storming out. Not like a victim crawling away. I was going to erase myself from her world with surgical precision. That night, I didn't say another word. I slept on my side of the bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled on her phone like nothing had happened. The light from her screen flickered across the room, but I didn't turn to look at her. I wasn't even there anymore, not really. I was already gone, just waiting for the right moment to make it real. The next morning, I got up earlier than usual. I brewed 1 cup of coffee instead of 2. I didn't set her mug on the counter the way I always did. I showered, dressed, and left the house without saying goodbye. No drama. No questions. Just silence. I drove straight to the bank. Within an hour, her access to our accounts was gone. Every card frozen. Every automatic payment rerouted. The car was mine. The paperwork, already in my name. By noon, she had nothing but her phone and the clothes she was wearing. She wouldn't know it yet, of course. She'd sip her morning coffee, assuming her world was still intact. She'd scroll through her social feeds, smirking at strangers, while I was quietly dismantling the foundation of her life. She thought she'd wounded me with her words. She had no idea she'd just freed me to act. That day, as I stood outside our house looking at the life we had built together, I didn't see a home anymore. I saw a stage where I had been playing the wrong role for years. And for the first time, I walked away without looking back. The hook wasn't her rejection. It was my silence. Because silence was the one thing she never expected from me. The first crack showed faster than I expected. That morning she tried to buy her usual latte on the way to work, swiping the card with that lazy confidence she always carried. Declined. She tried again, frowning, then pulled out her phone to check the balance. Empty. I wasn't there to see her face, but I could imagine it. That sudden confusion. That disbelief. The way arrogance slowly turns into panic when the world stops bending the way you're used to. She texted me around noon. 3 short words. Something is wrong. I didn't answer. I left the phone on my desk, screen buzzing once, then going dark. By the time I came home that evening, she was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, like she was preparing to confront me. She said the cards weren't working, that her gym membership was frozen, even the streaming services. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just shrugged and set my keys on the counter. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I could have said. That night, she stayed up late, pacing the living room. I could hear her making phone calls, trying to explain to customer service agents why her access had suddenly disappeared. I lay in bed, calm, almost peaceful, listening to the muffled frustration spilling from downstairs. It was the kind of storm I no longer had to walk into. I had built it, and now I let it rage without me. The next morning, she asked me if something was going on. Her tone was cautious, not hostile, almost testing. I looked at her once, then kept buttering my toast. She hated that. She wanted me to react, to argue, to give her something to push against. Instead, she got a wall of calm detachment. That silence unnerved her more than any fight ever could. Days passed, and the weight of my absence started pressing down. The car, now legally mine, never left the driveway unless I was behind the wheel. She had to ask for rides from coworkers, a humiliation she had never tasted before. At home, the fridge was stocked only with what I bought for myself. I cooked one portion at night, sat at the table, and ate while she hovered nearby, waiting for me to offer something. I didn't. She didn't dare ask. By the end of the first week, her confidence had cracked. She was restless, moving through the house like a ghost, clutching her phone as if answers would suddenly appear on the screen. I caught her staring at me one evening, her eyes sharp, like she was trying to read what I was thinking. But there was nothing to see. I gave her nothing. That was the point. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about balance. She wished never to touch me again, and I granted it. She had her freedom. Now she also had the silence that came with it. The real twist was that for the first time, she wasn't the one pulling away. She was watching me drift, and she couldn't stop it. By the second week, the silence between us had become its own kind of weapon. She was used to me chasing, filling in the gaps, patching the holes whenever she pulled away. But now there was nothing to hold her up, nothing to reassure her. That was when she began to shift. It started with small gestures. One evening I came home late from the gym. She had set the table for two, candles lit, pasta steaming in bowls like we were in some staged photograph of a happy couple. She sat there waiting, pretending it was casual, as if she just happened to feel like cooking again. I sat down, ate quietly, thanked her for the meal, and left it at that. No compliments, no warm acknowledgement, no spark of recognition she could feed off. I could see the flicker of disappointment when my words didn't give her the validation she wanted. The next night, she poured 2 glasses of wine and left them on the coffee table, her body angled toward me, waiting for me to join her. I looked at the glasses, then at her, and simply said I was tired before heading upstairs. She was left alone on the couch, staring at the untouched glass, her hand tightening around the stem of her own. For the first time, I saw it in her eyes. She wasn't in control anymore. She tried harder after that. One morning, she touched my arm lightly as I buttoned my shirt. The kind of gentle touch that used to be instinctive between us. But now it felt staged, a desperate attempt to pull me back into orbit. I flinched, not dramatically, just enough for her to notice. That single gesture hit her harder than any argument could have. She pulled her hand away as though burned, her face faltering for a moment before she covered it with a tight smile. Her confusion grew with each day I stayed silent. She asked about my schedule, about where I was going after work, about who I was with. I gave her nothing but short, cold replies. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't dismissive. I was polite, controlled, and distant. Exactly what she had always claimed to want, space. Only now she was choking on it. What she didn't understand was that this wasn't revenge. I wasn't staging a performance to punish her. I was simply done. Detached. Free. The silence wasn't a tactic. It was a new reality. And she was finally beginning to feel it. By the end of that week, she had stopped trying to hide her unease. I caught her watching me constantly, as if searching for cracks, as if hoping I would snap and give her something familiar to push against. But all she got was the same calm detachment. She had built her power on the idea that I needed her more than she needed me. Now that illusion was collapsing right in front of her. The turning point came one night when she finally broke the silence. She said she missed the way things used to be. Her voice trembled, the first sign of real fear I had heard from her in years. I didn't respond. I just looked at her, then turned away. For the first time, she was the one left reaching into the void, and I wasn't there to catch her. By the third week, her patience had eroded. The silence wasn't just uncomfortable anymore. It was unbearable for her. I could feel it in the way she hovered around me, watching every move I made like a detective waiting for a slip. But there were no slips. Just silence. Just distance. Just me living as though she wasn't even in the room. One night, I came home later than usual. I had stopped rushing back, stopped trying to fill the evenings with her presence. Instead, I found peace at the gym, in long drives, even in sitting at a diner with a cup of coffee where no one knew my name. When I walked through the door at nearly 10, she was waiting. Her hair was curled, makeup on, as if she had staged herself for an audience I refused to acknowledge. She asked where I had been. I said simply that I had things to do. Nothing more. No explanation. Her lips tightened at the corners, her eyes narrowing like she was piecing together a puzzle she couldn't solve. The next morning, she checked my laundry. She thought she was subtle, folding shirts that didn't need folding, her fingers slipping into pockets in search of receipts, clues, anything that could explain why I was no longer orbiting around her. I watched her, silent, not calling her out, just letting her stew in her own suspicion. That unease was its own punishment. By the weekend, her suspicion turned into veiled accusations. She asked if I was seeing someone. Her tone wasn't curious. It was sharp, tinged with something close to fear. I didn't answer. I simply met her gaze for a second, calm, then went back to my book. That silence said more than words ever could. It wasn't confirmation. It wasn't denial. It was ambiguity, the kind she had once used against me. Now it was eating her alive. I noticed her habits changing. She stayed off her phone more when I was in the room, as if trying to show me she was present. She wore lingerie to bed, garments she hadn't touched in years, her movements deliberate, desperate even. But I didn't respond. I lay still, the gulf between us wider than ever. The rejection wasn't loud, but it was absolute. She was no longer the one withholding. Now it was me, and the power shift was suffocating her. Her friends started to notice too. I overheard her on the phone one night, her voice low, asking if she seemed different, if people thought I was distant. She tried to laugh it off, but the tension bled through every word. It was no longer about whether I wanted her. It was about whether someone else did. And that thought consumed her more than anything else. For the first time, she wasn't the one in control. She was the one spiraling, chasing shadows, drowning in doubt. And I stayed silent, steady, untouchable. That was the real shift. She had built her identity on the illusion that I would never leave, never stop needing her. Now she wasn't just losing me. She was losing herself. By the fourth week, her suspicion had hardened into something uglier. It wasn't just quiet questions anymore. It was surveillance. She started asking where I had been the second I walked through the door. She scanned me like she was searching for invisible clues, perfume that wasn't hers, a receipt, a change in expression. She wanted proof, anything that would explain the growing distance. But she didn't understand. Proof didn't exist. I wasn't running toward anyone else. I was simply running away from her. One night, I noticed her phone on the counter, angled just so, the camera lens facing the entryway. She thought I wouldn't see it. A recording, maybe. Evidence. I walked past it without breaking stride, sat down at the table, and ate my dinner in silence. She checked the phone later, eyes darting nervously, but I never acknowledged it. Let her drown in her paranoia. Her behavior became more erratic as the days dragged on. She started staying up, waiting for me to come home, as though catching me late at night would expose some hidden truth. But the truth was simpler and crueler than she imagined. I was going to the gym, reading in coffee shops, driving nowhere in particular, just to feel the quiet she had stolen from me years ago. When she demanded to know where I was, I gave her nothing more than a calm, empty line. Just out. The less I gave, the more frantic she became. I could see the cracks spreading. She stopped posting on social media, something she had once lived for. Her friends texted less, probably sensing her unraveling. I watched her wander through the house like a restless ghost, cleaning counters that didn't need cleaning, opening closets and shutting them again, searching for something she couldn't name. She was beginning to feel what I had felt for years, emptiness in her own home. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon. I told her I'd be gone most of the day. I didn't say where. When I came back, the house was spotless, dinner was waiting, and she was dressed like it was our anniversary. She smiled too wide, too forced, as if she could stage manage her way back into my orbit. I sat down, ate quietly, thanked her, and walked away. The look on her face when she realized it wasn't working, that was the moment she broke. Later that night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. Soft at first, then louder, like she wanted me to hear. I stayed in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. No reaction, no movement, just silence. The same silence she had once forced on me. Only now it was mine. She thought ignoring me would give her power, but the silence she built had become a weapon in my hands. And the more she fought against it, the more it consumed her. The irony was perfect. She had wished never to touch me again. Now she was the one desperate for contact, and I was already gone. By the time the month closed in, her mask had slipped completely. The woman who once spoke with arrogance and distance now moved through the house with a nervous energy, as though every sound I made carried hidden meaning. She was no longer subtle. She was desperate, and desperation always reveals the truth. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table. No candles this time, no staged dinners. Just her, elbows on the surface, hands clasped like she was praying. She asked if I still loved her. Her voice cracked on the word, still, and in that moment I realized she already knew the answer. I didn't respond. I opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and left her sitting in that silence. For years, I had begged for scraps of affection. Now she was begging for clarity, and I wasn't about to hand it to her. Over the next few days, her attempts became bolder. She followed me from room to room, asking what she could do, what I wanted from her, why I was acting so cold. I kept my face calm, my words minimal. Every, "I'm fine, and don't worry about it," cut deeper than a scream ever could. She wanted me to break, to unleash the storm so she could argue, cry, and rebuild. But storms are temporary. Silence lasts. The real fracture came late one night. I was lying in bed when she crawled in beside me, closer than she had in months. She pressed herself against me, whispered that she missed me, that she wanted to fix things. There was no pride left in her voice, no arrogance, only fear. I stayed still. I didn't reach for her. I didn't turn my back. I just lay there, calm and unmoving, until her whispers dissolved into sobs. Eventually she rolled away, curling into herself on the edge of the mattress. The same edge I had occupied for years. Now it was her turn to feel the cliff beneath her. She started texting me during the day, something she never used to do. Messages stacked up on my phone. "Hope your morning's going okay. Can we talk tonight? I miss you." I read them all, replied with short, detached answers. "Thanks. We'll see. All good." The more indifferent I was, the more frantic she became. It was like watching someone try to grip water with bare hands. The tighter she clutched, the more it slipped away. What struck me most wasn't her desperation. It was how quickly she abandoned her pride once she realized I wouldn't chase her anymore. She had built herself on the illusion of control, but now she was asking permission just to stand in the same room with me. That was the final humiliation. Not that she had lost me, but that she had lost the version of herself she thought was untouchable. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to slam a single door. The silence had already done its work. By the time the month reached its final stretch, her desperation had spilled beyond the walls of our home. She could no longer hide the cracks, and the world around her began to notice. That was the part she never prepared for. The audience she once performed for now saw the unraveling she couldn't control. It started with her sister. I overheard a call late at night. Her voice was shaky, pleading, asking if she seemed different, if I was acting strange. She tried to disguise it as casual conversation, but the quiver in her tone betrayed her. Her sister pressed her, asked if something was wrong in the marriage. She denied it, too quickly, too defensively. I stayed silent in the next room, listening to the performance crumble. She wanted to seem in control, but even her family could hear the panic she couldn't mask. A few days later, one of her friends stopped by unexpectedly. I was in the garage when I heard them talking in the kitchen. Her friend asked if she was okay, said she looked tired, distracted, not herself. She laughed it off, said work had been stressful. But her voice cracked on the lie, and I could imagine the expression on her friend's face, suspicion, maybe pity. I didn't step in. I let her struggle under her own weight. At work, people began asking questions too. I knew because she brought it home, complaining that her coworkers had noticed she was off. That word, off, haunted her. She had built her identity on being untouchable, on projecting confidence no one could penetrate. Now others were seeing the weakness she couldn't hide. Every whisper, every curious glance chipped away at the image she once wore like armor. The more people noticed, the harder she tried to compensate. She posted cheerful photos online, staged smiles, empty captions about gratitude and growth. But the timing betrayed her. Everyone who knew her could see the mismatch between the polished images and the panic simmering beneath. The more she pretended, the more transparent she became. Meanwhile, I said nothing. I let her family, her friends, her colleagues draw their own conclusions. I didn't defend her. I didn't explain. I didn't cover her tracks the way I used to. My silence outside the house was just as sharp as the silence inside it. And that silence let the truth spread further than any words could. The moment that sealed it came at a family gathering. We sat at the table, surrounded by relatives. She laughed too loudly at a joke, her hand trembling as she lifted her glass. Her mother leaned toward me later, asking quietly if everything was all right between us. I smiled politely and changed the subject. That single smile told her more than a confession ever could. Her illusion of control wasn't just gone, it was exposed. And the worst part for her wasn't that she was losing me. It was that everyone else could see it happening. By the time the month had fully turned, the walls of her world had collapsed inward. The woman who once spoke with certainty now whispered like a stranger in her own home. Her arrogance was gone. Her pride had evaporated. What remained was something raw, unrecognizable, desperation. One evening, I came home to find her waiting at the bottom of the stairs. There was no pretense left. No makeup. No stage dinner. Just her, pale and fragile, clutching the railing as though the house itself were slipping away from her. She asked if I was leaving. The words weren't sharp, not accusatory. They were hollow, pleading, almost broken. For the first time in years, her voice carried no control. It carried fear. I didn't answer. I walked past her, calm and steady, as if she hadn't spoken at all. She followed me up the stairs, her voice trembling as she asked again, begged really, if I intended to stay. I turned to her only once, met her eyes for a brief moment, then closed the bedroom door between us. The sound of her muffled sobs on the other side was not triumphant. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the echo of a reality she had built with her own choices. Over the next days, her attempts became shameless. She clung to me in the kitchen, whispering that she was sorry, that she didn't mean what she had said weeks ago. She promised to change, promised to try, promised anything that might tether me back to her. Each word sounded less like a vow and more like a plea for survival. I listened without responding, without acknowledging, as though the air carried her words past me into nothingness. Silence was heavier than any response, and she felt its weight. Her desperation spilled into messages too. She wrote long paragraphs late at night, confessing her fear of losing me, reminding me of our history, begging me to give her another chance. I read them, let the screen glow against the dark room, then set the phone aside. I didn't reply. The silence itself was my answer. The final collapse came when she physically knelt in front of me one night, her hands clutching mine as she begged me not to walk away. Her tears stained the floor, her body shaking as though her soul was unraveling. It was the moment she thought would break me, the moment she believed no man could resist. But I stayed still, calm, my hands unmoving in hers. And after a long silence, I gently pulled them away, leaving her to collapse into her own emptiness. She had wished never to touch me again. Now she was begging for that very touch, and I was already long gone. The morning I decided to leave for good felt strangely calm. There was no fight, no dramatic explosion, no broken dishes or slammed doors. Just quiet resolve. I woke before sunrise, packed a single bag with the essentials, and looked around the house one last time. Every wall, every chair, every picture frame felt like a stage set I had outgrown. This wasn't home anymore. It was a museum of mistakes, and I was done being its curator. She was still asleep when I walked past the bedroom door. For a moment, I paused, not out of hesitation but clarity. I had carried the weight of this marriage longer than I should have. Every silent rejection, every careless word, every glance that looked past me had stacked on my shoulders. And now, finally, I was free of it. Before I left, I took care of the last details. The accounts were already frozen. The car was already mine. But the locks, I changed them. By the time she woke up, her key would no longer fit. The house was no longer hers to walk into freely. That was the final cut, the last invisible thread severed between us. When she woke, she stumbled into the living room, hair tangled, eyes wide when she saw my bag. She asked where I was going, her voice hoarse from another sleepless night. I didn't answer. I didn't know her that. She tried again, her tone climbing, panic bleeding through, demanding to know if this was the end. I looked at her once, calm, steady, and then walked past her without a word. The sound of the door closing behind me was sharper than anything I could have said. She followed me outside, barefoot on the cold pavement, calling my name. I kept walking. Her voice cracked, broke, collapsed into sobs as she pleaded for me to stop, to turn back, to give her one last chance. But I didn't. I opened the car door, set my bag inside, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. By the time she realized what had happened, it was too late. Her access was gone, her comfort dismantled, her control shattered. She stood alone in the driveway, screaming into the morning air, and I was already miles away. The silence she once used to wound me had become my weapon, my shield, my exit. She wanted distance. Now she had more than she could bear. And the cruelest truth? I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even sad. I was free. And nothing she could say, no tears, no promises, could ever touch me again. The days after I left felt like stepping into clean air after years of breathing smoke. There was no chaos, no guilt, no gnawing ache in my chest. Only clarity. I didn't move into some new relationship. I didn't run to friends for sympathy. I built something quieter, sharper. My own life. I rented a small apartment overlooking the city. Sparse. Clean. Mine. Every corner free of her perfume, her stage decorations, her suffocating presence. I bought furniture I actually liked. I cooked meals for one and enjoyed them. I went back to the gym with focus, lifting heavier, running longer. My body grew stronger, leaner. I wasn't rebuilding for her. I was remembering who I had been before her. People noticed the change. Coworkers commented on the calm in my eyes. Old friends said I seemed lighter, more grounded. Even strangers sensed it, the way I carried myself now. I wasn't the man who lived under someone else's shadow. I was untouchable, unreachable. Meanwhile, she tried to claw her way back into my life. Calls at midnight, long messages filled with apologies and half-truths. Even letters slipped under my door. I ignored them all. Each attempt was weaker than the last. Her once commanding presence reduced to noise I barely noticed. She even showed up at my apartment once, pounding on the door, her voice breaking as she begged me to open. I never did. The lock stayed firm, her cries muffled by the silence I had mastered. Her family reached out too. They wanted to understand what had happened, why she seemed so broken. I told them nothing. I didn't need to. They had already seen the unraveling with their own eyes. The silence was explanation enough. Every night I slept soundly. No tossing, no restless thoughts replaying old conversations. Just deep, undisturbed sleep. I realized then how long I had lived with weight on my chest, how long I had carried someone who was never really beside me. And now, without her, I breathed freely for the first time in years. She, on the other hand, was left with the silence she once wished for. The house that had been ours became her prison. The friends who once envied her began to pity her. She wanted me to turn back, to see her pain, to acknowledge it. But I didn't. Because the truth was simple. She had made her wish, and I had granted it. I didn't disappear. I just stopped being there for her. And in that emptiness, her own choices screamed louder than any words I could have said. The final line of my story isn't anger, or revenge, or even triumph. It's colder than that. She once told me she never wanted to touch me again. Now she never will. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.